Good afternoon. They told me to use the microphone so that everybody hears us even across the pond. Madam Minister, Madam President, Excellencies, everybody who has gathered here, who is watching us online. This is live stream. We have an hour, and we're going to finish exactly in an hour. My name is Karlis Bukovskis. I'm the director of the Latvian International Affairs, and I am honored to moderate this discussion, United in Security, the new challenges in the Nordic and Baltic region, which is organized by the Nordic Council of Ministers and Stefan Eriksson, wherever you are. Thank you very much for putting this all wonderful panel together with such a tremendous and excellent speakers that we have. Very quickly, let's start with our minister, Ms. Baiba Braže, an experienced diplomat and also a former NATO operative, if I may use the term like this, and currently, of course, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Latvia. Brandis Haraldsdottir, President of the Nordic Council and member of the Althing, so the Icelandic Parliament. And Dr. Jānis Vucāns, member of the Latvian Parliament, also head of the permanent delegation of Latvia to the Baltic Assembly and vice president of the Baltic Assembly as well. Right? Everything mentioned correctly. Good. So far, so good. So I will give each panelist so that you also know and you can follow this through and you know when they're going to be finishing, because it's easy for me. I have a microphone without the cord, so I can run away. They are strapped down, so they cannot run away. So your questions are more than welcome. Okay, we're going to have 8 minutes to each of the participants initially for initial remarks, and then afterwards we're going to have a Q&A session. You're going to be given a microphone so you can easily ask a question. Again, please be ready to ask provocative questions. We always love provocative questions. So content-wise, of course, Russia's aggression against Ukraine has changed a lot of things. It changed over the past more than 10 years already, but of course especially since 2022. And there are some historical changes that have been happening, and two the most visible ones in the Baltic region, of course, is the NATO membership of Finland and Sweden, 2023 and 2024 respectively. So in this case, this is this changed security situation, changed security environment. This is the main topic of our debate and conversation today. So from the Baltic perspective, Minister Braže, if I may ask you to explain from the Latvian, Estonian, Lithuanian, as we are such a good friends and such a good brothers, I believe we have common position on how do we see this accession of Sweden and Finland into NATO, and how it conceptually and practically is changing lives in the Baltic states.
Paldies, thank you very much. I actually thought this was a panel about the Nordics and Baltics and what we have in common, and that it's for the people, I was told that. So I had prepared what is common among us, which is midsummer and celebrating it. And I think that's the only region in the world that does it. We prefer beer to any other drink, at least from the statistics. I don't know about individual choices. We watch quite a lot of Nordic noir, Baltic noir movies, from what I see lately. That's the newest trend that unites this region. We love sauna diplomacy, at least among foreign ministers, which we did just a couple of weeks ago with Nordics and Baltics and swimming in Finnish Sea. And then from there on, obviously, I think the harder subjects and more serious subjects we have all in NATO, and which means commitment to each other in a very concrete way. That means not just signing up to some abstract values, but actually committing to defend each other and give each other our blood, if necessary. And that goes both ways. And taking into account that Russia has been identified as a threat in NATO, by NATO, to our citizens and populations, that also means very concrete engagement by our military, armed forces, and all of societies in narrowing it down. What does it mean in terms of both Iceland not having a military force, but being in NATO. What is the resilience in Icelandic population? What does it mean for Iceland to be defended? Or what does it mean for Baltics to be defended, but also to defend others? And why are we there? In the same time, obviously, I think the most important links are among the people. When we look both at the connections, air connections, trade connections, company connections, anything that we have, there is no region more closely tied to each other than the Baltic-Nordic region. So this is the friends, this is the allies, this is a community that literally have things in common, both on paper in real life, but also through the blood and through our engagement with each other. And what has it changed? I think it has formalized what we always wanted. I mean, on the military side, we can discuss, you know, what does it mean in terms of resupply of troops, with the logistics, with the forward presence, with next week we meet all finally NATO summits with Sweden having joined just now. I mean, there's a lot that has been said already that we can then drill down into details, but I think this larger sort of spectrum is actually as important as formalizing what we had always wanted.
Thank you. A quick follow-up question in this case. The Baltic Sea now is as we have been discussing this a lot, an internal lake or internal sea of NATO. When you hear this, what comes to your mind? How do you conceptualize this term? What does it mean that it was internal sea of the European Union before, but now it's being an internal sea of NATO? How do you operate with this term?
Again, you can look at it at different levels. It does provide certain operational depth for countries on various angles, depending on what type of exercises, what type of threat scenarios you look at. It also provides for a highly developed sort of understanding of the threat, because neither Norway nor Finland nor the Baltics nor Sweden or Iceland have to be told what is it to be faced with Russian threats, and that concerns not only maritime or sea or air, but also space and various hybrid threats. In the same time, we have very highly developed discipline, organizational skills, ability to organize ourselves at a societal level, so which again, for the resilience, for the sort of ability for the society to understand the threat, to defend itself, and to organize at various levels is necessary. So, and that relates both to cyber, which again, the high educational levels, the high ability to understand and know, the high level of use of technology, the advancements. That's why this region is so special and so very different from other regions.
Thank you. Organizational note. There are still places available in front, and especially I think I see some kids back there, so just let them through so that nobody has to be standing under the rain.
We also have weather in common in our region, I think.
Yes. President Haraldsdottir, if I may now turn to you, from the Icelandic perspective, what has this completion, let's say so, of the Baltic Sea region from the economic and political and military perspective given to Iceland and the Nordic cooperation in general?
Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me to this event. Now I feel a little bit more like home after it started raining, because if we would have a festival in Iceland, it would most definitely rain. So yes, we probably have that in common also. Just to mention in the beginning, I represent here the Nordic Council, which is like a regional parliamentary cooperation between all the Nordic nations. And then the ministers also have a lot of cooperation throughout the Nordic Council of Ministers. And we also have a very tight connection with the Baltic. So we, on the parliamentary level, work a lot with the Baltic Assembly. They have been great friends. Thank you for all of your assistance during the years in that. And then I know that the ministers also very often have what they call NB8 meetings. And I know from my friend back home, Þórdís Kolbrún, your colleague, that she really appreciates that in all foreign...
we did sauna together.
Ah, one thing more, yes. So I have to say that we feel it in the Nordic cooperation and between the Nordic parliaments, how security issues are much, much more, of course, on the agenda. I mean, after the invasion, everything changed. All the international cooperation I've had as a parliamentarian has just the focus on what is happening there. Before the invasion, I think, at least speaking for being an Icelander, I think many of the Nordic also, we were quite naive. I think you in the Baltic were much more reasonable about what could happen. And we just didn't believe, and I say for myself, I thought that I would not live time where we would see war as the invasion in Ukraine, like boots on the ground. We have been preparing for cyber threats and hybrid activity and such things, but this was just like an eye-opening for many of us. But I think the Baltics were more prepared in that sense. And we see it in the Nordics that Finland and Sweden, they were running really fast after the invasion to apply for NATO membership. And that, I think, will change a lot in the Nordic and Baltic cooperation, definitely. I think the ties were there before, but even now they are more strict and closer. And I think for us, like parliamentarians in the Nordic, it's just so important to be able to have this discussion with the Baltic parliamentarians, discussing this together. And hyper threats are such a huge issue. And I know you in the Baltic have been very front runners in like cybersecurity, and there we can learn a lot from you guys. So yeah, I think that there is a lot of changes going on now in the cooperation, and I see we are just getting more and more tight in that sense. And also I have to mention, as we do not have an army in Iceland. We are a very small nation, and we do not have an army, but we are one of the founding members of NATO. So our security is through NATO. And of course, we also have to put something on the table. And I'm sure we can do that in many ways, even though we do not have a strong army. But I have actually started this discussion that maybe in the future we would see like a Nordic army. We see that the Nordic armies are working a lot together. So maybe we will develop more into Nordic, Baltic. Of course, now everyone are in NATO. So I think it will change a lot.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a quick side note. In the Leonard Meri conference a couple of months ago, your president said that when Iceland joined NATO, Iceland considered that its membership in NATO is already its contribution to NATO.
Sorry?
Icelandic membership in the NATO is already the contribution to the NATO. And therefore my question, because you just managed to show me a thing which I don't know exactly about Iceland. How do you spend then 2% of GDP on defense if you don't have an army? What do you spend it on?
Next question, please. So, of course, that's the answer. We do not spend 2% of our GDP in security because we do not have army. But I have to mention that I think there's also different ways of how we structure our society. So just to mention one thing, we have these big eruptions going on around Grindavik, Reykjanes, Venezuela, where we have had to evacuate a whole town, 4,000 people. We have been building up these walls so we are getting the lava from going to the town and towards a huge electricity factory. I am pretty sure in all the other nations, if this would have happened, the army would have been there. And the army would be doing that. So we have our national policy, policy, and all other structures that are doing that kind of things. But I am sure that we could put more into our defense of the whole as a NATO. But then I also have to mention our logistic situation is geopolitically very important. And then you come into an area that is of an interest of mine, and that is the Arctic area. And we are actually focusing a lot on that in the Nordic Council right now, safe and security in the Arctic. And there, of course, we have this neighbor, Russia, which has half of the Arctic. And a place like the Arctic is totally bounded on international law, and that people follow international law. But what will happen when people do not follow international law? And there we have a huge ice sea area which will be difficult to defend if people want to do something other than follow international law and human rights and what we here stand for.
But I would also like to come to my contribution that Iceland actually was an original founder of NATO, because actually without having Iceland where it is, it would be very difficult for the US forces to ensure the defense of Europe. So Iceland's position and actually where it is, the way it handles itself, the democratic culture, the ability to manage itself is crucially important for the whole of alliance. And Iceland has, of course, a very good contribution also to the EFP here, which is a Stratcom specialist who was here, and also the demining unit and quite a bit of other capabilities. And what I like the most is that Iceland's foreign minister is also chief of defense.
It's nice to know that because of Icelandic example, because of many other countries, you know, the NATO countries also have a wide variety of understandings what is democratic and what is not. Dr. Vucāns, also a question for you, because, well, the Baltic Assembly and the Baltic cooperation with the Nordic countries, that's what I wanted to ask you. There are different rumors that now, when the situation has changed, that we could see that the Nordic Council could be joined, maybe joined by the Baltic states, and it would be a completion like in this form. So can we expect, is this rumor true? Is this invented just by somebody? Can we expect some mergers, some expansion of existing formats? What's the collaboration going to be now in the next years?
Honorable Minister, Honorable President, Honorable Director, and Honorable spectators. You are true. We are on the way to join. But let me start with mentioning the importance of the place where we have this discussion. 2 weeks ago, here, just across the street, we celebrated 105th anniversary of so-called Cēsis battle, when Latvians, together with Estonians, protected newly established state of Latvia. I already told this story to my friend Brindis, and it's a very important moment in history of Latvia. 35 years ago, nearby, Baltic Way passed from Tallinn through Riga to Vilnius, and we was on our way for independence. Let me transfer to all of you also warmest greetings from Andrius Kopčinskas, from the President of Baltic Assembly. Unfortunately, he is not able to be here today because he is in Vilnius and Lithuania today, and tomorrow they are celebrating 100 years of song and dance festival tradition. And it's also common for all 3 Baltic countries. We are together with Estonia and Lithuania in UNESCO list of heritage. And it's very important, all these features, if we are looking on not only on military aspects, but on geopolitical aspects, because everything has some basics. So, if I try to answer to your question, of course, we need to take into account that in 1991, Baltic Assembly as interparliamentary organization was established, taking as some model example Nordic Council and also the Benelux Parliament. And we tried to took the best from them, and of course to make this our form of interparliamentary cooperation in the form that is more corresponding to our needs. Therefore, Baltic Assembly is working on the committee basis, and if we are speaking about all these things related to defense and security, in Baltic Assembly we have a special committee on defense and security, and I would like to mention that on it was December of last year, when we have Nordic Council and Baltic Assembly Summit in Tallinn. We made agreement, we signed agreement about cooperation for next 3 years. And in this agreement, in the first position is our help to Ukraine, taking into account all those things that relate to the geopolitical situation, how to help not only in the fields of battle, but how to help also reconstruction works in Ukraine and so. If we are speaking about more direct forms of cooperation, Brindis already mentioned cybersecurity and other issues. Those issues are on the table of Baltic Assembly, but in this our cooperation agreement we mentioned that we need to look for common solutions with respect to cybersecurity, with respect to fight with fake news and all these things, because maybe in Baltics we are a little bit more experienced on that, because this is our everyday, let's say, in attention of us every day. But we remember that a few years ago there was a situation that fake news to Latvia came through Sweden, even through some transmission programs that was emitted from Sweden, and therefore we need to cooperate. There is no other choice how to do this. If we are speaking about other forms of cooperation and where Nordics and Baltics could be more close, of course it's energetics policy. It's very important aspect, not only in the Baltic states, but in our discussions we discovered that it's also very important in all Nordic countries. Recently in the spring, we together with Nordic colleagues visited Faroe Islands, and we saw how they independently on their small islands are looking for such solutions. And I need to say that in those discussions with Nordic colleagues, we came to one very important conclusion, that previously we mainly spoke about cooperation, and we spoke about making some big systems, how to operate them together. During the war, maybe we need to think a little bit different. We need to think about some separate institutions which protect separately every state, and it's a little bit other type of thinking during such new geopolitical situation. So those are maybe only few of aspects that we together with Nordic colleagues are discussing when we have our common meetings. They are coming to Baltic Assembly meetings. We are going to their meetings. Since 2014, every year I have participated in the meetings of Nordic councils in all 5 countries. And before, in every my speech, I spoke about necessity for Finland and Sweden to join NATO. Now it's happened, and I'm very happy of that. Thank you.
No, thank you. A follow-up question, please. You scared me for a short moment. Tell me that I'm wrong about it. You said that the Nordic Council and the Baltic Assembly met last year and decided to on cooperation for the next 3 years. That's an awfully short term for such a major thing.
I need to answer that it's tradition that we are making new agreement every 3 years. Therefore, this agreement was traditional. But of course, during current period, when situation is changing every day, every week, every month, I'm sure that on our next meeting we will reconsider. But Ukraine will be on the first position. It's clear.
Okay, so it is electoral cycle, right?
May I add to
Of
this?
course.
I think it's also the reason because we are, of course, always changing members in the Nordic Council because we have free election in all these countries. So there are always new people coming in. So I think it's even better to have it not as a long term, but if we have a long ties together for a long while, and we will be working together into the long future. So I think it's okay to also bring it up often. So maybe it's not like the long-term view, it's more the view that everyone agrees on the importance of cooperation between these two bodies.
Yeah, and if I may, to my mind, it's very important also to fix something on the paper in some documents, because for newcomers it's visible that we are on the track. But I would like to mention another organization. It's a Baltic Sea Parliamentary Conference, in which the interparliamentary organization currently of 10 countries around the Baltic Sea, in which we are together. 5 Nordic countries, 3 Baltic countries, and Germany and Poland as well, and also regional parliaments of those countries. And it's very important to work also in different parliamentary formats to look for the best possible solutions.
Thank you. Have anything to add? No. Colleagues, do you have already some questions? Yes, please. The microphone? Okay, I'm going to...
Norwegian ambassador.
Yes, and no microphone.
Thank you. Yes, you're right, Minister. Ine Marin, the Norwegian ambassador to Latvia. I have a question to all 3 of you. The subject and regional forests you are talking about, how can you make those attractive to the young voters? We are talking about Ukraine has to win this war. That's the main thing. We are in a year of a lot of elections among today, where there are some rather dramatic shifts. But how are you 3, as politicians, going to make sure that the younger generation are actually turning up to these elections and committing and engaging themselves?
Can you repeat the very end, the sound sort of went?
What are you going to do to make sure the youngsters vote and get active in politics?
How do we make sure that youngsters vote in the elections? I think at different levels. First, personal level, that our own children, our own relatives, our own family members, friends, and so on and so forth, that we do need to talk about politics and responsibility, that it's not outside us, that politics is part of who we are. We are political animals, all of us at a certain level, and children should not be isolated from those discussions. And I don't want to put any examples in my case, but we have had a lot of interesting discussions in the presence of children with our friends and family members and in the embassy with their kids and so on and so forth. And I think that's something that needs to happen, that life is not just about choosing what type of color of ice cream or where to go on holiday, but it comes with responsibilities as members of society. And then, of course, taking them to vote together with you. There's a lot of practical things that I think matter. Then on a sort of macro level with regard to what can we do as political parties or societies, I think political parties, and I'm a very new politician, just a few weeks ago joined the political party, but I do think that we have to have a conscious outreach policy to the schools, to the young people. We have to go and visit and meet and listen, not necessarily tell anything. We all like to talk, but actually listening is important. And whether they join party or they don't join parties, that's a secondary element, but really having the direct engagements matter. Career days in the organizations, whether it's private businesses, whether it's other organizations. And the third in my book would be, and it's not like hierarchical, it's at the same time, is self-organization, what I already mentioned earlier, is that it's important that people organize themselves in whatever groups they want to believe in, whether beekeepers or football clubs or choirs or film clubs. I really don't care what is that, but that is also part of interest groups, how you organize yourselves and how you become an active member of a wider societal movement, which leads you to also understand and engage in politics in a direct or indirect way. So I think those 3 points I would highlight from my side.
Yes, thank you for this question. It's a really interesting one. I have to say that back home in Iceland, I'm not worried about young people. I think they're really active. Maybe not politically active in that sense to choose a political party, but they are activists and they use different forms of showing us what they are fighting for. So, because we recently had a presidential election back home in Iceland, and the winner, Halla Tómasdóttir, which will be our next president, she probably won very much because how she was focused to the young people throughout social media and to get her message, to have meetings and all of that with young people. So I think we all saw there how important young people are in that sense. I also have to mention that we in the Nordic Council, we have a Nordic Youth Council, which is really active and have been doing a great job. They always have their session in connection to our session. And they're so active youngsters there, and they're doing a really good job. And now in August, I will have the opportunity to have a meeting with them where they will be in Utøya in Norway, where they will have this summer session with youngsters from all the Nordic nations. I don't know about the Baltics though, but someone from Ukraine also. And they have done this twice before, and it has happened very, very well. So I think we have so much opportunity with young people and to get them more active into politics. But as a mother of a teenage sons, I also have to say that I sometimes worry very much about what is going on out on some socials like TikTok or something like that. So media literacy and getting young people, and all of us, of course, to be very much aware of what we see on social media and following, is it really true, is very important. And I think we should do more, all of us, about that during our through our educational system. But I see so much opportunity towards young people, and I think that us that are a little bit older, we can learn so much from them, how they activate themselves in group throughout different aspects that they are following and fighting for.
Yeah, I need to agree that very many depends on the family. I mentioned Baltic Way 35 years ago, and I'm sure that those young boys and girls which 35 years ago stand in the chain of Baltic Way at the age of 5 years, now are explaining to their kids what does it mean for this historical moment for Latvia. And so from so small pieces we are building this belief in the future of our country as well. In everyday life, I'm not only a politician, I'm also a university professor. I have possibility to meet young people every week, and teaching to them maths and also business administration. I have two fields. Every time I also have some possibility to speak a little bit about history, a little bit about how we need to operate in one or another situation, how possibilities we have, do we have the real choice, and very important is to show to young people that really there is possibility to have choice and to decide what to do, not only to follow somebody, but also by themselves to decide something. And I need to say that, especially if we are speaking about the students of universities, they are on this track to look for choices. So, but I need to agree to you that it's very complicated issue because young people are very different. There are active and not so active. There are families in which we are speaking about history and families in which we try to not speak about that, and therefore very many depend from us, from our examples, how we are operating. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more hand up. We're going to continue the diplomatic political debate, but if we could, in this case, yeah, I see there are even two. Well, excellent. Thank you so much. But please, Ambassador, let's start with you.
Thank you. My name is Karin Höglund. I'm the Swedish ambassador to Latvia. And thank you to the panelists. And I'm always happy to follow in the footsteps of my Norwegian colleague. But on an entirely different topic, Madam Minister, you mentioned economic cooperation, and I'm not sure you mentioned economic security as such, but that, of course, is a very important aspect of security. And you, sir, mentioned energy cooperation, energy security. And we all know this and we all talk about this, that it's very important, but how are we going to achieve that? And Baiba, Madam Minister, you mentioned, again, on economic cooperation, Sweden is holding the NBA coordination responsibility this year. And one of our speaking points is that the Nordic-Baltic region can be, has potential, is actually, if you put all our economies together, the 10th largest sort of economic zone in the world. And how do we make use of that? How can we make use of that better? Thank you.
Thank you. Who wants to answer the economic question? The professor of economics, of course.
Maybe I will start. If you are speaking about energy security, the tasks of the current moment are a little bit different for Baltic countries and for Nordic countries. Because for Baltic countries, the main issue currently is desynchronization from Brill network, from Russia and Belarus, and synchronization with Western Europe. And we know that if all things will go good, so on the February of next year, it will happen. That we will not be energetic Iceland, we will be in common network. Another very important thing is interconnections, new interconnections with more capacity, for example, between Sweden and Latvia or Lithuania. It's not decided, but we need some additional link. We have those links between Finland and Estonia. Also, we need more capacity on those links. We are speaking also about common gas market. This and common use of LNG terminals. It's another issue, how to operate all these things. So there are common moments, there are a little bit separated. And but big challenge currently is a common gas market for at least 4 countries: Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and Finland. We need that this gas market will operate in the coordinate way in the nearest future, because this is the issue of the how to heat our houses and other things, and also how to get more electricity, because open question is also about the use of nuclear energy. Estonia, it seems, is decided. In Latvia, we start to talk about that. Lithuania is thinking that they had bad experience and they are a little bit waiting. In Finland, they have already, and they are looking for new possibilities. So, it's shortly, but maybe my colleagues will add something.
Thank you. Duan?
I think the economic security aspect is, of course, what we all sort of, when we look ahead in our future and we worry and we think how it's going to be for us, as you know, when we retire, whether the pensions will be enough, how our children will do, and so on and so forth, but also the predictability, the sort of welfare model, which also I think is what we in the Baltics are aiming for. whether we are able to maintain it, and that is a typical European question, because in the US the model is completely different. In a number of other countries it's also a very different societal model. So I would say it's not so much about the Nordic-Baltic, but how to maintain that European way of predictability of your life and reliability of your life. And I think there is no one answer to that. It's indeed how you enable the market forces, how you enable the companies to be successful while having such a high level of regulation on the European market, which is, again, for a simple purpose of having a single market. And it's important for companies to compete. In the same time, high level of social spending, high level of health spending, and now also security defense issues. And especially for the Baltics, I would say currently, it's a big challenge, spending about 3%, above 3% of GDP on defense, how to make sure it comes back into economy one way or the other, that it's not just spent on buying stuff that is foreign stuff that you then bring in and just use. So recreating the working places here, having pre-positioning, having some sort of logistics lines that are short, that we are able to produce stuff ourselves and supply our army, supply our armed forces, the incoming forces if necessary from the allies, is a big question, and that is the way we are going about it. So I will be leaving shortly to Valmiera to welcome my Estonian colleague to visit Patria factory there. And that is a very good example. I see Finnish ambassador who is not asking any questions today, but actually to also show that as an example, that it's not just spending on defense, but it brings back into the economy. The same, there's a lot of dual-use stuff that can be used for civilian and for the military purposes, that especially in Latvia I see how the companies are developing. It's really great, actually, to witness that. So there is a need to help that. There is a need to help that, whether it's a reduction of bureaucracy, whether a reduction of regulation, making it simpler, making it shorter cut. Not always easy, believe me. Dealing with valstskontrolle and, you know, sort of making sure that actually what you do achieves the outcome of having that defense force, having that technology company able to work and not imposing additional restrictive measures on them. In the same time, of course, you know, there is a huge help to Ukraine ongoing, about 1% of GDP. It will continue, so that adds on top of the defense spending also for security. And now also the big burden on the external border of the EU and NATO, that we are both investing nationally, where the EU doesn't allow itself to invest in infrastructure, but it has to be done. So we will do it nationally. The overtime for border guards, the overtime for customs officials, the overcrowded customs warehouses that need to be guarded. There's a huge amount of spending that is going on because we are defending the others. That's the way how we feel. We are defending those that are not spending 2%. So we are telling them quite openly, come on guys, this is not good. You need to come in and reach that level, because the capabilities that need to be produced as a result will be needed for deterrence, for defense, but also for ensuring that there is no mistake, that we are all in it, and that it's a true Euro-Atlantic solidarity. So altogether, I think we are going the right way about it. So there is economic element, there is security element, there is enabling element, as Jānis explained, on the energy, on the interconnections, on the infrastructure. And I think we also have some of the highest technological levels in our Nordic-Baltic region in terms of both the skills, how to use technology, how to use digitalization, and so on and so forth. We just returned yesterday from state visit to Greece, where we also met our diaspora. And they just couldn't believe, telling the stories to us, how difficult it was for them not having access to e-services in Greece, which seems very natural to us in Latvia, whereas they have to go to local government each and every case personally, instead of, you know, doing the e-signature or requesting papers or submitting papers digitally. And for us, it's something that we take it naturally, that it's something that public service is providing. But also learning how to earn money from that would be good.
Thank you. Please.
Yes, thank you. And I think, these are really big questions being raised. How are we going to achieve energy security and economic security? And I think we could go on the whole day with those questions. And I'm not going to repeat what they've said, but I think we would agree in many ways. But I just also want to mention sustainability thinking, green transition, and equal transition. And then I also would have to mention when we talk about security, economic security, it has also all to do with welfare security, our democracy, and trust, which we sometimes call the Nordic gold, how important the trust is in the society. And I think actually what we are looking at now in kind of hybrid war with Putin, both invasion in Ukraine, but also hybrid war against the European Union, the European nations all, that they are trying to tear down our trust on society. So our work here as a like-minded nation is to secure that. And that, connecting also to the question earlier regarding the young people, they are also the key to that. So how we do it through our educational system and how we do it through maybe events like we are attending here to build on trust and democracy.
Yes, it works. Wonderful. We have 1, 2, 3 questions. If we could start combining them, if you don't mind, please.
Ilota Ladze from Marta Centers. We are talking about security, and one of the crucial issues to ensure security is also combating organized cross-border crime, and especially trafficking in human beings. And as Marta Centers, we also see that it's present, it's growing. We see how young people are involved in trafficking, in sexual exploitation, but also in drug trafficking and other forms of trafficking. And it's really important that we find a way how to shift common understanding about this crime cross borders, and also efficient investigation, prosecution, and stopping this crime, and common understanding of what is sexual violence and sexual exploitation and so on. As we know that also within conflicts, sexual violence is like a war weapon. But what we see also in Latvia, that our police, they just don't initiate any criminal proceedings when it's case of trafficking, especially sexual exploitation. They are not willing neither to investigate nor to prosecute. So what do you see how we can become more efficient in raising this issue about trafficking, building common understanding, and being more efficient in very practical ways to combat this organized crime?
Thank you. Thank you. Human security is an essential thing. Please pass the microphone on.
Hello, dear speakers. I'm Rebecca Zviedrbola. I'm an international relations student here at Riga Stradiņš University. And my question will be about hybrid warfare and hybrid war tools. As the Icelandic representative mentioned, it is very important that we pay attention to them. And one of the tools Russia has been using for contraband or even intelligence gathering is drones, and we've seen how drones become utilized in Russia's warfare in Ukraine. And that is why I've noticed that the ministers of Baltics, also Norway, Finland and Poland, have been involved in talks about the drone wall. However, correct me if I'm wrong, to create such wall, it means that to detect these drones, we have to put these detection systems before our borders in Russia. And that is off the limits, of course, and that is why I wanted to see hear your perspective on this. Is it even possible? Are these talks going to be finished with something fruitful? Thank you.
Thank you. And you're holding the moderator's microphone. There's one more question here in the third row, the gentleman in the white shirt. No, yes. Please, pass the mic. Just hold it a bit further from your mouth.
I'm just a visitor, pensionary. My question is, I think we all used to say pretty often, Ukraine must win this war. How we can imagine that winning then the victory's day in Ukraine, meanwhile Putin ruling the Kremlin?
Thank you.
It's just our wish. It's a utopia. I don't understand it.
Yeah, thank you. That's a wonderful geopolitical question. How the Baltic states see.
On the last one, I think you always put a policy objective, what you want to achieve to any action, because you can't just put a dream and say, I'm going to work towards a dream. There has to be a policy objective. So the policy objective for Latvia, for the Baltics, for the Nordics, but also largely for the EU and NATO is Ukraine's victory. Some countries word it like that, some countries word it differently, but that's essentially what the effort is about. And it involves very practical things such as providing military aid to Ukraine, again, for a particular military both strategy and tactics that Ukraine is conducting. But it involves also many other sort of practical legislative policy actions, such as making sure our intelligence services share what they see and what they understand, that they share among us, among our countries, but that they also share what's necessary with Ukraine, so Ukraine would be understanding. It involves a very concrete work by the foreign ministers to ensure that, for example, sanctions to the sort of grade Russian military capability are very particular type of actions that we need to reach. And again, for that we need both the intelligence ability to understand what is that Russia is using. We need experts' ability on the economic terms with regard to understanding how Russia's economy is doing, how it's affected. So for that, yes, there is a policy objective, but then when you narrow it down, there are many practical steps that need to be done from the policy making level to policy implementation level across all pillars: military, economic, legislative, customs, cooperation, and so on and so forth. And the most important, that our people, that people in other countries would continue supporting Ukraine with everything that we can possibly do. Because if Ukraine loses both the will and the ability to fight, then there will be no victory. So that is what is the sort of policy. And on the question of drones, I think it's an early stage about the drone war. I don't think there is a very detailed answer yet, but as a concept, it's a valid concept, both for the understanding, the challenge and the threat, because again, in order to respond, you need the understanding. So it's understand and respond. So the drones are very useful both to understand, but also if necessary to respond. But I don't think it's into techniques yet where to place the reception or not and how to make it interoperable. You also need to be able to counter electronic warfare and to do your own electronic warfare. There are, again, quite a bit of technical stuff involved in all that.
Thank you, Minister Braže.
Yes, thank you for all these good questions. And I want to start with this, how can we become more effective in fighting organized crime? And I actually think a cooperation, international cooperation, is a key factor there. This is actually on my agenda back home in my parliament back home in Iceland. And we are learning a lot from all the Nordic nations. Probably it could also be in better cooperation with the Baltics. But this is all about cooperation because, as you said, it's cross-border. And the people that don't want to follow the law, they just flow wherever. So we will have to cooperate on this. And it is really important, and we can see it in the Nordics. I know there has been quite many news regarding Sweden recently, and what they are doing in fighting this, especially youngster being dragged into some gangs. And that is, I think, a red signal to us all. How can we prevent it, and how can we fight it? But I just want to change over to the Ukraine. I think it's all about laws. I mean, we are thinking about societies, the welfare of societies. And we have to have law for that. And people have to follow the law. And we will have to have some kind of means if people do not follow the law. And that is what happened in Ukraine. I mean, there are borders. There is international law. You cannot move borders. So Putin cannot do that. He just went into another country and took over part of it. And so there have to be consequences of what is happening in Ukraine, both towards the military assets to Putin, his regime, and that is something that we've already started out during our international cooperation. We had a big conference on this in Reykjavik last year with the Council of Europe. So this is all connected. And I know we have a short time, so I don't know so much about the drones, but I will follow up. Thank you.
And I would add, actually, that society has to take a much more active role in societal participation in seeing what is happening in our communities. We are delegating everything to the police. Police is overburdened. I really sympathize with our policemen, both at the local level and at the national level. Everybody is just delegating everything to them, which is not right. There is a society policing. There is an active possibility to involve yourself in social groups, in community groups, whether in local governments or regional governments, to do that for minor things, to maintain order, to prevent certain crimes, instead of just calling police and then being angry that, you know, they don't show up because they are busy with other things. So then actually concentrating on the high-level crimes, on the important organized crimes, they would have both more time, more resources, and wouldn't be as totally exhausted.
Thank you. I was already ready to cut the cord.
Yeah. I will start with some additional issues relating to criminal situation. 2 weeks ago, I participated in the meeting of Benelux Parliament in Hague, and after that we visited the port of Rotterdam, which is a hub from which many drugs are coming also to our countries. But in those discussions with parliamentarians of Benelux countries, and also Hanna from Nordic Council participated, we discovered that exchange of information is absolutely the first thing that we need to pay attention. And after that, there are some operational issues for police, for customs, and they will do their job. But information is the most important. Answering to the question about win of Ukraine, to my mind, it's a conceptual question. I'm a mathematician, and in mathematics there is a proof from opposite. And I will ask, is there some possibility for us to put this question or to answer to this question in some other way? All other answers, it's not future for Baltic countries. This is the problem.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're running out of time. There's 90 seconds left, so sorry there are no more room for questions, also for the answers. Sorry for cutting some of you short. This is on the Nordic-Baltic cooperation. It's on the new environment in which we're living. So we have integrated economically, militarily, politically, labor movement-wise. Cultural integration is happening. Still, the question was from the Norwegian ambassador how to engage more people, how to make everybody feel like we do belong. We are all part of the same group of Nordic Baltics. Again, an old suggestion from my side, and I'm going to leave you with this. We can have our own NHL, Nordic Hockey League. That always works. That's the best soft power tool there is, sport and culture. And this is the way how we can embrace each other even more than we already have. Thank you very much for being here with us, and round of applause to such a wonderful, wonderful panelists.